Welcome to Echoes of the Past, where history isn't just old, it's oddly fascinating.
From forgotten facts to bizarre backstories, we dig into the dusty corners of time
So you don't have to. I'm JoDee Lynn, your amateur historian and full-time trivia hoarder.
And I'm Efrain, here for the facts and the fun.
So let's rewind the clock and press play on the past. So a quote by J.A. Haberman from Zombies: A Culture History: "Zombies are the ultimate monster of the modern era, a mindless, endless wave of terror that reflects our own anxieties about death, disease, and the collapse of civilization." Now, the word zombie comes from Haitian voodoo and refers to the reanimated corpse of a deceased person controlled by a witch or sorcerer. But it wasn't until the 1960s that zombies became the brain-eating monsters we know today, with the release of George Romero's Night of the Living Dead in 1968. Romero didn't call them zombies, though. He referred to them as ghouls. But this film set the template for all future zombie horror. The zombie genre has come a long way since the days of slow-moving, mindless corpses. Today, when we think of zombies, we're not just imagining a reanimated corpse seeking to devour the living. Now we've got infected, driven by rage, disease, or even fungus.
It's been a pretty big evolution. What's interesting is the idea of reanimation and the undead. It has been with us for centuries, long before Romero's film brought zombies into the mainstream. But today, we're deep diving into how the zombie and its more recent cousin, the infected, have evolved across film, TV, and video games.
Now, when thinking of the undead and the reanimation, there is a difference. With something being undead, it is still dead, but now moves around. For instance, vampires, zombies, draugr, and skeletons, whereas reanimation is restoring to life and or consciousness, like necromancers would do. Think Frankenstein and Jurassic Park dinosaurs. So, getting started, the undead rise kind of starts with the Haitian folklore and the colonial fears. The word zombie, spelled Z-O-M-B-I, originated from Haitian voodoo. The early zombie myths involved enslaved souls brought back to life to toil forever, a metaphor rooted in slavery and colonialism. Then Western exposure began with travelogues and sensationalized writings in the 19th century. The very first film appearance was White Zombie in 1932, starring Bela Lugosi, a Haitian-style zombie under mind control, not brain eaters. It is a seminal horror film directed by Victor Halperin and starring Bela Lugosi. It is often regarded as the first full-length zombie film, and it follows a young couple, Madeline and Neil, who travel to Haiti for their honeymoon. There they encounter a local man named Murder Legendre, who uses voodoo to turn people into mindless undead slaves. The film explores themes of control, the supernatural, and the fear of the other, setting the foundation for the zombie genre in popular culture. Unlike the flesh-eating zombies we know today, the zombies in White Zombie are reanimated corpses who serve as slaves to their master. Whew.
Bless you.
Thank you. So, when I had asked you about this earlier, and if you knew about how zombies started in Haiti, you had kind of already known that, right?
Yep.
How? Because me being somebody who's loved zombies their entire life, knew nothing about this.
Yeah, so it's about middle school, high school, at like kind of the peak of the zombie fascination where they were practically in everything.
Yeah.
There was a YouTuber I watched, I think Lemino, was talking about kind of the same topic, like the history of zombies, but I think it was solely in movies, and he probably talked a little bit about video game zombies.
Okay.
But he went over the backstory like this, so I kind of already knew a little bit of this information before we decided to do this episode.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know where I thought zombies came from, but Haiti was not where I would have expected. So I had kind of touched on George Romero a minute ago, but his first film came out in 1968, which was Night of the Living Dead. This changed everything. This introduced flesh-eating zombies and set the modern template. Romero never really called them zombies, though, just ghouls. It was also a commentary on racism, Cold War anxieties, and social breakdown. Now, we had this conversation a few minutes ago when kind of researching some of this stuff. Romero called them ghouls. When we were talking about trying to think of things that had zombies in it, I had asked you if you thought Fallout technically had zombies in it, which were the ghouls that were radiation-soaked humans, essentially.
Yep.
Now, Romero would have called them probably zombies, but you had a good, reasoning on why they would not be.
Yeah. Oh, ghouls. So the ghouls in the Fallout series, they're not zombies simply because they were still alive when they were turned into ghouls. Yeah, they're really animalistic and they do eat skin or eat flesh, but they're not zombies because they didn't die. They're still alive, just really devolved. Yes, really gross. They're just really devolved humans that they're just pretty much animals.
So, going off of that, would you say that a zombie would have to die first and then come back as the undead to be considered a zombie?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Well, so
explain.
So like in the traditional sense, like zombie, flesh-eating corpse, like Resident Evil, the T virus that makes the zombies.
Yeah.
When a person gets bit, they die first, and then the virus reanimate or turns them into a zombie.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas some other things, like also Resident Evil, there's a parasite called Las Plagas. They don't die first.
Yeah.
But they still act like they act like zombies.
Gotcha.
But I guess they wouldn't really be a zombie because they didn't die first, so they'd be more
plagued,
I guess. I don't know. Resident Evil is very confusing. There's too many diseases and parasites to think about, and unless you want to sit down and watch like a whole 24-hour movie, which I've done about all these different Resident Evil plots, viruses, plagues, and all that other jazz, be my guest. But it's very confusing. Don't think about it too much.
Gotcha. So I'm kind of with you on that, though. I feel like to be an actual zombie and not just like Romero calls them, a ghoul, I feel like they do have to die first and then come back. Now, granted, there are a lot of games where they don't die first, but they are technically zombies, like Dying Light. They don't technically die first. They slowly succumb to it.
Yeah, they just degrade.
Right.
The brain degrades. It's like
so. I think in that point they are the zombies, but I think at that point it's more of a brain dead and not a body dead. Because I feel like with some things they don't go full death; they go brain dead, which I feel like does the same thing, in my opinion. So going back to George Romero real quick. He had a series of 3 movies come out. We talked about Night of the Living Dead. The second in the series, it came out in 1978, so 10 years later, and was based on consumerism metaphor. So Dawn of the Dead is the second film in Romero's original zombie series and a direct sequel to Night of the Living Dead. This is set in a post-apocalyptic world where the dead have risen to devour the living. The film follows a group of survivors trapped in a shopping mall. Romero uses them all as a satirical setting, critiquing consumerism and materialism as the survivors. Surrounded by the luxuries of modern life, and they struggle to fend off the relentless zombie horde. Known for its graphic violence and social commentary, Dawn of the Dead elevated the zombie genre and introduced the idea of fast-moving zombies in later adaptations. Now, thinking of this movie, we kind of hit on the zombie horde aspect. Now, you play one game that is so perfect to this that I cannot think of anything better. You play Zombie Army, and that is a game specifically just about zombie hoarding.
Yeah.
With that, do you think that the fact that he brought in a zombie horde and was kind of like the father of the zombie, do you think that people seeing that come out helped to influence a lot of the zombie video games?
Yeah.
Because you've got what? You've got Zombie Army, you've got Call of Duty. I think all of them do zombies, don't they?
Call of Duty, Zombie Army.
They have the Nazi one, don't they?
Yeah, that's Zombie Army.
Okay.
Yeah, the Zombie Army trilogy, then you got Zombie Army 4. I said COD Zombies. It's a small horde. It's still a horde, though. Dying Light will have hordes. A lot of what I think about video games though with hordes is that when I don't think you can ever have enough bodies in a horde for video games, because if once you start adding a whole lot of bodies,
they start to degrade the servers and stuff.
Your game will start to slow down because it has to render all these bodies. I mean, yeah, you can make them less quality the further they're away, but that's still a lot of moving parts.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't really get the sense of how big a horde can get from a video game.
That's very fair. Now, with movies, I would say that I don't remember very many having massive hordes. Like, they kind of have, like, little herds moving around, but full-on hordes. The only movies or TV shows that I can even think of right now, and it's probably just because we just watched it, was The Last of Us. Their recent, what was it, episode 2, season 2, where they brought in that massive horde that took over the town out of the snow.
Yeah.
So that is like one of the best, like, well done things, in my opinion, as far as zombie hordes go in recent adaptions and things that have come out. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Or do you think somebody else has done a bit of a better job?
I think with the Last of Us season 2, that episode with the big horde, that you can really put into perspective how bad the cordyceps infection is, and how many people it's infected. So it puts it into perspective, like, it's a lot of people.
It's a lot.
And granted, it's only like a small section in, where was it, Montana?
I think
that the town's in.
It's either Wisconsin or Montana, one of the two.
It's Montana.
Or Wyoming.
And that's just Montana, where there's nothing out there but corn and weirdos. Compared to, say, like California, where there's a lot of people, especially like in LA or the Bay Area, or like New York City. That's a lot of people in one condensed area. It's in Wyoming.
I was like, it was one of the plains.
It's one of those middle of nowhere states that like 12 people live in.
Somebody's going to hear this later on and be like, hey, don't be hating.
I'm going to hate all I want.
Now, going back to the hoarding again, would you say that, what is it called? We hit on it earlier when we were talking about this, The Walking Dead. Would you say that they had good horde mechanics in the TV show or the Telltale games?
So in the Telltale games, you'll have certain sections where the players will move through the hordes. Like in the first season, kind of spoilers, in the first season, in the end, kind of ending episodes.
Yeah.
When you're in, what city is it? It's in Georgia.
Macon?
Not Macon. You go to Macon, but it's not Macon. It's Savannah.
Oh, okay.
When you're trying to find Clementine's parents,
Oh, the boats. Yeah.
Yeah. Lee and Clementine move through a horde of walkers to find her parents. They find her parents. They're walkers themselves, but it's still a pretty good horde. In season 2, I'd say the midpoint, when Carver has Clementine and her group of survivors, they keep talking. Carver's group keeps talking about a big herd moving in their direction, and the Clementine's group decides to use that herd as a distraction while they make their escape. And then I think in the fourth season, the one not focused around Clementine, your characters also move through a big horde of walkers trying to make an escape. So I'd say
they hit a few, but it's not the main point.
But it's not the hordes are not the main point. They're part of the plot, but they're not the main focus of the plot.
That's fair.
They're there as an obstacle. And since these games use like a fixed camera, except the third or fourth season, you don't get to see how really big these hordes are just because the camera's in a fixed spot.
That's very fair. Now, moving on to the third of Romero's zombie movies, you've got The Day of the Dead, which came out in 1985, almost 10 years after the first and almost 20 after the second. This comes in and plays off of the militarization and science themes. So Day of the Dead is the third installment in Romero's zombie saga and takes the story to a more intense claustrophobic setting. The film focuses on a group of military personnel and scientists trapped in an underground bunker as society continues to collapse. Unlike the previous films, Day of the Dead delves into the psychological horror, examining the breakdown of human society and the ethics of survival. The zombies in Day of the Dead have evolved, and the film also introduces a new element, the attempt to study and possibly control the undead. Known for its gory practical effects by Tom
Savini.
the film's dark tone and social commentary made it an important, though controversial, piece in the zombie genre. So I do want to hit on this again because we were just talking about it. But did you watch any of The Walking Dead?
Walking Dead or Day of the Dead?
Walking Dead.
I tried watching it.
How far did you get?
Like 5-6 episodes in the first season, and that's about it. And then I remember scrolling through TV channels, like on Comcast, like seeing The Walking Dead pop up on the AMC channel.
Yeah.
And I'd click on it and just like watch a little bit. And like the last thing I remember is Rick's group being in the prison.
One of my favorite parts of the whole series.
And like they had all the zombies on the outside fence. So they have to go and reinforce it. But like watching it from like season 1 to whatever season
we're on now.
Whatever season it's on now. No.
Okay, so I watched almost up until one of the main characters gets brutally murdered by a baseball bat.
Yeah, Glenn.
Yes. And then I kind of got bored with it because after that, to me, it felt like it was just doing the same things. But the reason I wanted to touch on this was the fact that in Day of the Dead, they did try to control and study the dead, which there are a lot of themes within Walking Dead where I've noticed that different people have tried to control the dead or even study them. Like they'll lock them into places and like watch them. Or like the character who took their jaws off. So she had 2 walking zombies with her.
Yeah, Michonne.
Yes. So I believe that these 3 movies, like we were saying, has played such a massive role in how zombies are perceived in video games and TV shows and movies now. Like George Romero really was the father of zombies, in my opinion.
Yeah. Put it out there in the mainstream so everyone's should be acquainted with what the idea of a zombie is.
Exactly, yeah. So moving on from then, we're going to go from 2000s and to now with a pulp culture boom. So when you now have a ton of movies. There's over 100 right now in the media that are nothing but zombies in just different formats.
Yep.
So a few of them, 28 Days Later in 2002, and then of course the new one that's coming out this year in 2025. Then you've got Resident Evil that also came out in 2002. This reintroduced the fast zombies and the viral outbreaks. Then we have Shaun of the Dead in 2004, a parody and love letter to zombie films. Then, of course, like we were saying, we've got The Walking Dead from 2010 to 2022, which brought zombies into prestige TV and emphasized the human drama. Then, of course, you've got the book and film for World War Z in 2006 and 2013, which brought the global zombie pandemic. You've also got movies like, of course, the Zombieland movies, which brought more of a comedic feel to them. You've got Quarantine that was more of like a rabies outbreak, but it was still very much a zombie feel to it, which you said was based off of what?
It's a movie called Wreck, based out of Spain. It's a found footage type movie. So if you guys don't like shaky cams and feeling kind of nauseous, don't watch it, but it's still pretty good.
Okay. What would you say about the Korean zombie movies? Because you're the one who brought that one up.
Yeah, I think it's kind of slowed down, but with like the Korean zombie stuff, like Train to Busan, #Alive, the Kingdom series, they've gotten really popular over here in the States. I like Kingdom. I've watched #Alive. I haven't watched Train to Busan, but I heard it's really good.
We should watch that. We should definitely add that to our movie list.
I think it's on Netflix.
It is.
Yeah. But like seeing how another culture handles zombies is interesting. Because like #Alive, it's set solely in one guy's apartment. He barricades the door and he just lives in his apartment while that whole outbreak's happening right outside his window. And like he
sounds like the life.
Sure. And it's it's a good watch. I watched it forever ago, and it's pretty good. Kingdom as a series is pretty good because it's not set in like the modern times. It's set during, I don't know if it's considered the medieval period of Korean history, but it's, you got your kingdoms, you have your hierarchy with the emperor, the queen, and it's about his son and another group of people. It's a pretty good series. Watch it with subtitles because the dub is very cringy. I don't know who they got to do the voiceovers, but it's not pretty good.
Not pretty good. Got it.
Pretty good. Very bad.
But of course, you've also got Land of the Dead, which you told me about. Can you explain that one?
Land of the Dead?
You said it was Land of the Dead.
Land of the Dead or Dawn of the Dead?
You said Land of the Dead.
1 second.
Well, while you look that up.
Yeah.
You've also got, of course, Warm Bodies that brought the zombie into, again, another comedic, but also a whole different view. Like, these zombies, I don't know if you've seen it.
Seen clips of it.
These zombies were like they went into the movie and it kind of changed the thoughts of how zombies could be. Did you find the Land of the Dead that you were looking for?
Yeah.
So you were telling me about that one. What would you say that one is?
So it's still zombies. It's like, from what this overview says, it's way into the zombie apocalypse after the whole thing kicked off.
Yeah.
From what I remember watching it, the zombies get more intelligent, I guess.
Okay.
So the main zombie of the movie, he knows how to use firearms, and that's a scary thought.
That is kind of a scary thought.
Like, what if you're minding your own business and then you get popped in the leg and you're trying to look around and you don't see no one, but then you see some zombie shamble out into the street with a gun in his hand. You're like, well, I'm boned.
I'm dead. Toodles. So, with that, you also have some more recent TV shows that show zombies in a whole different era of like how they can be or how they may act. Like, I was telling Efrain that you've got the show Zombie, which I've seen every single episode of this. It's a hilariously good, I guess, cop thriller drama. I don't really know what you call it, but basically a woman went to a party, took some kind of pill, and became infected and bit this girl, the main character, and so she died and came back as a zombie where her skin is now white. She went from being brunette to almost like a white blonde, and she worked in a coroner's office, and to solve the crime of the people who got killed, she would eat the brain as the zombie of the victim, and she would regain some of their memories, and that's how she would solve their crimes. It's a very funny drama. Then you've got the Santa Clarita Diet with Drew Barrymore, who somehow becomes infected and is now having to kill for her dinner and to survive. And her husband gets wrangled in, and they're very different views on zombies. They're not the horror that most zombie movies and films and TV shows have come to be. Now, moving on to our favorite topic.
Video games.
Video games. When it comes to zombies in video games, you have
a lot.
So many options. And this is where my love of zombies has come in. If I find a video game that has zombies in it, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to find a way to play this game, whether it scares the living bejeebus out of me or not. You've got the very first in 96 of Resident Evil, which was a survival horror juggernaut. Then you've got Left 4 Dead, Dead Rising, Call of Duty Zombies, which brought in action-heavy zombie carnage. And then, of course, The Last of Us in 2013, which was emotionally grounded narrative with fungal zombies. Now, continuing off of that, some of the ones that I've played and I love the absolute shit out of, excuse my language here, but like...
Pardon my French.
Dying Light 1 and 2. You've got the Dead Island series, which are my absolute favorite games. I've played them so many times. You've got things like indie horrors that have zombies in them, like The Mist, and a few others that are usually on the cheaper side, so they're a little easier to get your hands on. What would you say some of your favorite video games are that come with zombies?
It's a lot.
I figured.
But I'll name a few. So with zombies, as a kid, zombies scared me because the idea of being eaten by something I recognize scared me.
Fair.
But growing up now, sure, it's still a little kind of scary, but it's like, so long as you're not like brain dead yourself, you'll be fine.
That's like 90% of the human population on Earth right now, but continue.
So like my first, I guess, experiences with zombies and video games would be like Call of Duty World at War, when they first introduced zombies into the series.
Yeah.
And Left 4 Dead 1 and 2. Those are Left 4 Dead. World at War zombies started the idea of wave-based survival and how many rounds you can get up to. Left 4 Dead 1 and 2, they have a plot to them, but it's so simple you don't have to worry about it. It's just each store or campaign is just getting from point A to B without dying.
Fair.
And in Left 4 Dead 1 and 2, they're not zombies. They're infected with like a strain of a rabies virus. But they have like mutated ones that you could, if like you glance at them, you're like, oh, that's some kind of zombie.
That's a zomboid.
Oh yeah, Project Zomboid.
That's a good one.
That's a good one.
I cannot wait for them to put multiplayer back in. I'm so excited.
What else? There's also the Flood from Halo. They're not zombies. They're a parasite that just, they can bring back corpses, but they don't really try to eat you. Their main goal is just to infect everything in the galaxy. To be
like the cordyceps.
Yeah, so it's just one big hive mind. That's a whole another thing.
I feel like that falls more into the infected style of zombies than the actual zombies.
Yeah. Like JoDee said, the Dying Light 1 and 2, I've played the first Dead Island game. I didn't think it was that memorable, but everyone liked it. I think it's just because it was a different change.
It is very
compared
different.
to what was coming out at the time.
Yeah, because I got that game shortly after it first came out. So I think that might be why I'm so in love with those games.
Yeah, and then you got the Zombie Army trilogy. Love that game. It's set.
Trust me, I know.
It's set during like the ending hour, or not the end days of World War II, and Adolf Hitler enacts a thing called Plan Z, where he brings back the fallen Wehrmacht soldiers through occult magic. So they're not really in a way of like an infected or a parasite or whatever. It's magic that brings them back.
Magic.
Yeah, they still eat corpses. Yeah, they try to beat you to death with their hands, but they're still zombies. You have to shoot them in the brain to kill them. It's a good series. Zombie Army 4, sequel to the trilogy. It's also pretty good. It's set a few years after the main events of the trilogy, where Europe. It all takes place in Europe. I forgot to mention this. It all takes place in Europe. If you couldn't figure it out, where the zombies kind of degraded, where they're called husks. They're still zombies, but they're not as strong as when the first time, or not first time infection, when they were first raised from their graves. What else?
You've also got Minecraft, like we were talking about earlier.
Yes. So Minecraft has zombies,
but they're not the main focus.
They're just kind of there as an obstacle to the player.
Now, if you think about it, you've got the zombies. You've also got
skeletons.
You've got the skeletons. You've got the pigmen, because those are technically reanimated in a way. But I think that falls more into the necromancer part of it. Would you say that kind of matches?
Yes.
Because they're zombies, but they're pigs.
Well, in Minecraft, they start out as pigmen. They're all alive, and they will try to. They're not hostile right out the gate. I don't remember. It's been a minute since I played Minecraft. But if they get struck by lightning, I think, or there's another way to it, they become zombie pigmen. They changed the name a few years ago. They're not zombie pigmen anymore, but they're still.
They still look the same, don't they?
They're still the texture is different, but they're still the same thing. I'm going to call them zombie pigmen because that's all I knew.
That's fair. I mean, you've got a countless amount of video games and movies out that you can delve fully into the zombie lore of everything. He's over there. Now, when we're thinking about everything that zombies come into, I do want to say, because you brought up a good fact, that you were terrified of zombies as a kid, right?
Yep.
When I was little, my reoccurring nightmare was about zombies. I would be locked in a warehouse and they would just be coming in from every door possible. Like, this was a vivid nightmare of mine, which makes it ironic that now my favorite topic of video games is now zombies. Now, before we kind of move on, go into the Star Wars zombies, because we've talked about that. You had me listen with you on the way to Idaho for Christmas.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And I had never heard of this before.
Yeah. So there's a book by Joe Schreiber called Star Wars Death Troopers. Now, they're not the same Death Troopers as introduced in Rogue One, a Star Wars story, where they're these tall, clad in all black armor, elite forces for the Empire. They're zombies. And there's a prequel. It's a prequel, but it came out after Death Troopers, about how the Empire. It's not about the Empire. It's about the Old Republic. I haven't listened to it, but from what I understand, is it's a flower that was turned into a virus that made all these zombies, and the Empire was trying to figure out a way to weaponize it so they can control the zombies to clear like planets or whatever. But it's tale as old as time. Something goes wrong, and everyone on the Star Destroyer, where it originates from, in Death Troopers, gets infected. Of course, you have people who've escaped, and there's a small group that still is on the Star Destroyer away from the zombies, but they're like on their last legs. But you should listen to it. It's a good book, or read it if that's what your speed. But these zombies, they're a hive mind, and then what they retain some memory from when before they die as zombies, so they can use blasters, they can fly ships, they can
yeah, when they got to that part of the book, I was flabbergasted.
Yeah, they're pretty intelligent in the book. Granted, they're not as intelligent as your normal human being, but they're still pretty smart, and it's kind of terrifying to think that these zombies can fly a ship, shoot at me, use the momentum of a swinging vent to try and get me. Is pretty scary.
Yeah. Moving into or past this into the next spot on why we as humans are so stuck on zombies. I feel like it has a few different reasons. Mm-hmm. So I feel like they're an adaptable metaphor. They can kind of go into a lot of things like consumerism, plague, climate change, mass trauma. They're constantly being reinvented, slow versus fast, magic versus science, mindless versus sympathetic, and then also just the collective fear of losing individuality, civilization collapse, and pandemics. I feel like lately a lot of us are steering closer to the pandemic side because of everything that went down in like 2019 with COVID and all of these different things that are going on in the world. And so a lot of us, I feel, are going closer to that. Would you agree? Like the pandemic side of it?
It's, I guess, kind of relatable where like the government, I'm going to call it fear mongering because that's what it was. It was fear mongering. It was. They're like, oh, this is like the worst thing ever since like the bubonic plague, blah, 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 blah,
and blah.
Ebola. And you guys definitely seen it, some of the ridiculous things that have come out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's kind of like, it'd be relatable because it's a real world pandemic where lots of people got sick.
And we're all just kind of having to deal with it.
And we're just kind of have to deal with it. Yeah. And then like, let's say real life, there's an actual zombie apocalypse. I feel like it'd be the same thing. The government are going to tell you to stay in your homes and blah, blah, blah. Don't go outside. And people are going to freak out. Some people will revel in it and go out and just commit horrible atrocities because the government's breaking down. Some people were like, oh, this is my time to do the things I think I can do. And then 5 minutes in, you're already on the floor being picked apart by a corpse.
Yep.
But yeah, Those are my opinions.
And I was sticking to them. With you talking about the government, I do want to bring in the fact that the U.S. government does have a fictional plan called the Con Plan 8888, which is the Counter Zombie Dominance Plan, which addresses a potential zombie apocalypse. This plan, developed as a training exercise for the U.S. Strategic Command, outlines how the military would respond to a zombie outbreak. While not taken seriously, the plan's existence highlights the government's preparedness for various emergencies. So, a detailed look at it. They have a training exercise, and the Con Plan 8888 originated from this, involving junior officers using the Joint Operational Planning and Execution System, and it focuses on military response. So the plan details how the military would identify and control zombie threats, designating vital infrastructure and coordinating forces. It would have a real-world application, which, while fictional, the plan leverages the military's experiences in real-world disaster and outbreak responses. The plan also acknowledges the potential for civil unrest and outlines evacuation orders and quarantines, and then has the individual healthy humans abandonment. This plan includes the controversial notion that in certain situations, healthy individuals may need to be left behind to ensure the survival of the majority. Now, hitting on this, if I remember correctly, isn't it CNN or Fox that has a pre-recorded message for a zombie apocalypse?
CNN, I think it's CNN. I don't know if it's for the zombie apocalypse, but it is a pre-recorded message for the end of the world.
That's what I was thinking. I've seen that one float around a lot. This one I kind of just found randomly when I was looking up zombie movies a few years back, and I found that plan, and I thought it was the funniest thing to me. Yes, It is fictional, but the fact that they even have one is the funniest thing to me.
Yeah, and then it's better, like, thinking about it, and it's better than, like, how the government's portrayed in your TV shows and your movies and the video games, where the government just completely falls apart. And they're, like, so overrun so fast. Like the first episode of The Walking Dead. Or is it the first or second episode where Rick gets trapped inside the tank?
I think it's the second.
Yeah.
Because the first is where he comes out of the hospital and he's trying to find everybody.
Yeah.
And finding Carl.
But, like, it portrays the military as incompetent.
Yeah.
In some cases it is, with some of the stupid things they come up with. Mm-hmm. I would know.
Yes, you would.
But, like, yeah, it's fictional, but it's still interesting to see that the government kind of takes it seriously.
Yeah. Now, looking at infected versus traditional zombies. So up until now, we've really only talked about traditional zombies. We've kind of hit on the infected side of it. Mm-hmm. But the real difference here is that traditional zombies are the reanimated corpses or the undead, depending on how you look at it and which TV shows or movies you're looking at. They're often slow, supernatural, or vague causes. Now, the infected are the living people who have been overtaken by disease, pathogen. They're often very fast and aggressive. They're scientifically explained, usually a virus, a fungus, or a parasite. And this distinction really takes off in the 2000s and beyond, making horror more grounded and visceral. So when you think of zombies, your mind probably goes straight to the classics. Shambling corpses, arms outstretched, groaning for brains. But in the last couple of decades, something's kind of shifted. They're not just dealing with the undead anymore. We're dealing with the infected.
And these aren't your grandpa's zombies. These are humans who are still alive, technically, but driven into a frenzy by some virus, parasite, or fungus. It's a twist that takes the supernatural out of the equation and replaces it with biology, and somehow that's even scarier.
Take The Last of Us, for example. These aren't corpses rising from the grave anymore. They're infected with real-world fungus called cordyceps that hijacks their brains. It's not only believable, it's disturbingly plausible.
And the horror shifts too. In older zombies, the fear was external, death and disease and the unknown. But in these infected stories, the fear becomes internal. What if I get sick? What if I hurt the people I love?
You see that same kind of fear in games like DayZ and Scum. The infected aren't even always the biggest threat. It's often other players. Survival horror becomes social horror. Trust breaks down, and people are more dangerous than the monsters.
And that's the evolution of the zombie genre right there. Zombies used to be about the end of life. Now they're about the end of society, of identity, or control.
Now, hitting on the games again, we're going to talk about the infected side of this. So, the first one I want to bring up is DayZ, which did come out in 2013. It's technically an older one, but it is still a widely played game. There are thousands of people on the servers at any given time. It's not true zombies. They're infected humans who've been driven mad by a virus. And it has a huge emphasis on survival, human threats, and player-driven tension more than monsters. This reflects post-pandemic anxiety and distrust of society. At the same time, The Last of Us came out, also in 2013. Zombies are infected by the cordyceps fungus based on a real one that affects insects. Clickers, bloaters, and other stages shown infection as a biological horror and are deeply emotional and human focused. This shows loss, trauma, and ethical breakdowns. The third game that I touched upon was Scum, which came out in 2018. It's a playoff of DayZ in a slightly different dynamic. This is inmates on a prison island infected by a virus that's more mutation based. Instead of being called infected or zombies, they're called puppets. This brings in a mix of survival, biotech experimentation, and social collapse, and it has a commentary on surveillance and dehumanization. The infected in games like The Last of Us aren't just monsters, they're victims. That flips the script. The horror isn't just that they're coming for you, it's that they used to be someone's child, mother, daughter, sister, brother, Uncle Bobby Joe, any of these. So whether it's the mindless horror of the classic zombie or the fast-moving, infected frenzy of more modern takes, the fear has evolved. But the heart of the monster remains the same. It's about survival, society's collapse, and the loss of control. But as we've seen, the way we tell these stories has changed drastically over time.
And what's really interesting is how these monsters, the undead, and the infected have mirrored our deepest societal fears. From plague to consumerism to the question of what happens when everything falls apart, it's almost like they're a mirror, reflecting our own anxieties back at us.
Exactly. And that brings us to the big question. Why do we keep coming back to these creatures? What makes the zombie or the infected so terrifying? And why does it still scare us today? Let's dig into that as we wrap things up. Now, to me, I believe the infected is more scary than a regular zombie because it's things that I feel can kind of sweep under the radar for a while before it full blown goes psychotic. And knowing that something can invade me without me possibly knowing about it and turning me into the infected is more scary than me having to run away from something that I can see that I know will turn me into it if it touches me, kind of a situation.
Yeah.
You said earlier when we were talking about this that you thought something running at you faster than you are that could take you down was scarier.
Yeah, because when you think of, like, in some cases, some infections, they remove the limitations that the human body places on itself. So, like, being able to sprint incredibly fast without having to catch your breath or without experiencing any type of fatigue or pain while you're running is scary. Or like our strengths. The human body will limit itself on how strong or how heavy objects we can move or break apart so we don't hurt ourselves.
Yeah.
But with a zombie or an infected, those things that cause those people to be in a zombie or an infected person removes those things. So these zombies or infected, they don't care if they get hurt. Their end goal is to consume. So you blow a limb off and it keeps walking at you. Well, that's pretty terrifying. Or in the case of like Dying Light with the virals, that there's still a little bit of their humanity trapped in them when after they got infected and became a viral. That's also scary because like real life, you see one of these virals sprinting at you and you shoot at it, and let's say you hit it in the leg and then it begs at you for a couple seconds to kill them or to stop or whatever. It's going to throw you off.
It does every time I hear it.
So like the idea of these zombies still pretty much breaking the limits or still being a little human's kind of terrifying.
I get that. So a quote out of World War Z I feel like kind of sums this up really well, and a lot of what we've talked about was that zombies were never just about the dead. They were about what the living would do when the end comes. Since George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, the concept of the zombie has mutated, reflected society's evolving fears, from consumerism to pandemics, from environmental collapse to the digital age. In games like The Last of Us and DayZ, the infected are often far more than just a threat to your health. They're a reflection of our darkest fears and about what could happen when the rules of society break down. So, whether it's the classic zombie horde or the more recent viral outbreaks seen in The Last of Us or Resident Evil, the zombie has endured because it reflects one of our most primal fears: the loss of control, the collapse of society, and the question of what happens when humanity is no longer in charge.
The zombie's role in modern media is ever evolving, and as long as people continue to fear the unknown, the zombie will rise again and again and again. And that, with that being said, thanks for wandering through history with us on Echoes of the Past.
If you liked what you heard, subscribe, rate us, and tell that one friend who still quotes fun facts at parties.
And remember, history may repeat itself,
but we promise not to. See you in the next Echo.